The Young and the Restless spoilers. The web of betrayal, Sienna's dilemma and Victor's wrath. Sienna had always been a woman of careful calculation, never one to rush into decisions without fully understanding the consequences. But after receiving Holden's warning, something in her shifted. His voice had shaken her to her core, though she would never admit it. There was no denying the truth in his words. Victor Newman was a man to be feared, a creature born from the very depths of ruthlessness. He was not just a businessman, but the embodiment of power, the kind that could crush anyone in his path without a second thought. Sienna had spent years cultivating her reputation, navigating the treacherous waters of Genoa City's high society, but now, with Holden's warning echoing in her mind, she could no longer ignore the dangers that lurked just beneath the surface. Victor was no stranger to Sienna. She knew well that his reach extended far beyond what most people could comprehend. She had seen the damage he had caused, the lives he had ruined in his quest for dominance. And yet, Sienna had always prided herself on her ability to stay one step ahead, to avoid becoming another casualty in his war for control. But now, Holden had thrown a wrench in everything. The truth of their involvement in the accident that had sent Holden into hiding was the final nail in the coffin. No one could deny it any longer. They had played a part in the tragic incident that had shaken Genoa City to its core. The weight of that secret was growing heavier with each passing day. Sienna couldn't help but wonder, was Holden's warning meant to protect her, or was it a veiled threat? Could he have known more than he had let on? She couldn't afford to ignore it, not when her own life was on the line. The last thing she wanted was to be caught in Victor's crosshairs, to be seen as another obstacle standing in his way. But what choice did she have? The damage was already done. The question now was how far Victor would go to make them pay for their actions. Meanwhile, Holden was not a man to be trifled with either. He may have been terrified, hiding from the very world he had once ruled, but his fear was justified. Victor had no mercy. For years, Holden had been a thorn in Victor's side, a reminder of the past that Victor was desperate to bury. The accident had shaken Holden to his core, but it was the implications of his involvement that truly terrified him. He couldn't risk showing his face in public, not when Victor was so close to uncovering everything. Holden's escape was a cowardly act, but in his mind, it was the only way to survive. But Victor wasn't about to let this go. He was a man of action, a man who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. And what he wanted now was answers. He had Sienna cornered, and the interrogation had begun. No stone would be left unturned. He was a master at reading people, and he didn't need to say much to get what he wanted. His piercing gaze alone was enough to make anyone squirm. "What do you know, Sienna?" Victor's voice was calm, almost too calm, as he leaned forward in his chair, studying her intently. "Where is Mitch? And why did you and your husband target Noah?" The questions came one after another, each more pointed than the last. Sienna's heart raced, but she knew better than to let her fear show. She had dealt with men like Victor before, and she knew that the key to survival was to stay composed, to give nothing away. But deep down, she knew that the game was changing. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. Victor's reputation was built on his ability to manipulate, to get what he wanted without ever breaking a sweat. He was a man who understood power and how to use it to bend others to his will. He had played this game for years, and he wasn't about to let some petty betrayal stand in his way. His gaze never left Sienna as he waited for her response, his eyes cold and calculating. He knew she was hiding something. He knew there was more to the story than she was letting on. Sienna's mind raced as she tried to come up with a lie that would satisfy him. But she knew it wasn't going to be that simple. Victor didn't buy into half-truths or lies. He wanted the full story, every detail, every connection, and every motive. And if she didn't give him what he wanted, he would make her regret it. Victor had always been a master of psychological warfare. He could read people like a book, and he knew exactly how to break them down. Sienna wasn't immune to his methods. She could feel the pressure mounting, the walls closing in around her. She had always prided herself on being able to control her emotions, but now, in Victor's presence, all of her carefully constructed walls were beginning to crumble. The truth of the matter was that Sienna was caught in a web of her own making. She had tried to play the game of power and control, but now the tables had turned. She had no choice but to face the consequences of her actions. And as Victor's interrogation continued, she realized that there was no way out. He had her cornered, and there was nothing she could do to escape. Victor's next words cut through the silence like a knife. "You think you can hide from me, Sienna? You think you can keep your secrets safe?" His voice was low, but it carried an unmistakable edge of danger. "I don't care who you think you are. In this town, I make the rules. And you'll learn that the hard way." Sienna swallowed hard, knowing that the time for games was over. She had always been one step ahead of her enemies, but now, Victor had her on the defensive. There was no room for error, no room for miscalculation. She had to be careful, every word, every action had to be measured, or she would end up as just another casualty in Victor's war for control. As Victor's words echoed in her mind, Sienna couldn't help but wonder just how far he was willing to go. The man she had once thought she understood was now a dangerous unknown, and she had no idea how this would end. Would she survive this encounter? Or would Victor's wrath be the final blow that shattered everything she had worked so hard to build? Let me know if you'd like any adjustments or further expansions. Victor's wrath, the price of deception. Victor Newman was a man of few words when it came to getting what he wanted. And right now, he was demanding answers. There was no room for negotiation, no mercy to be found. His wrath was already a known factor in Genoa City, a force that could destroy anyone standing in his way. Holden and Sienna were no strangers to Victor's methods, but this time, the stakes were higher. Their fates hung in the balance as they faced the most dangerous encounter of their lives. It was one thing to betray the powerful Newman family from the shadows, it was another to do it face to face with the monster himself. The air was thick with tension as Victor entered the room, his eyes cold, his voice low with barely contained fury. "I don't take kindly to lies," he said, his words piercing through the room like a dagger. "You both know what happens to those who dare deceive me." Holden felt a cold sweat break out on his skin. He had thought he could hide, thought he could remain anonymous, but Victor was far too sharp for that. Sienna, too, could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She had known this day would come eventually, but nothing could have prepared her for the fear that now consumed her. She had never seen Victor so enraged. And what was worse, she knew that if she didn't comply, if she didn't give him the answers he demanded, there would be no future for her, Holden, or anyone else caught in their tangled web. Victor's eyes bore into Sienna, his face unreadable. "Where is Mitch?" he demanded, his voice unwavering. "Tell me now." Sienna's heart raced as she looked between Victor and Holden, knowing that if she didn't respond, it would be the end of everything. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Sienna dropped her gaze, her mind spinning with every possible consequence. She had spent so long hiding the truth, so long playing her part in this dangerous game of deception, but now, there was no more room for lies. Victor leaned forward, his gaze never leaving her. "You know what happens if you don't tell me. You'll both be buried in the ruins of your own lies. And I will make sure you regret it." Sienna, trembling, dropped to her knees, her resolve crumbling under the pressure. The floor felt cold against her skin, but it was nothing compared to the coldness creeping into her soul. She had always thought herself above the world she played in, but now, with Victor looming over her like a storm, all her pride and arrogance seemed meaningless. "Please, as Victor," Sienna begged, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll tell you everything. I will help you find Mitch. Just, please, don't hurt us. Don't destroy us." Victor stood tall, his towering presence like a shadow that swallowed everything in its path. His face remained hard, unreadable, as he watched Sienna's desperate plea. There was no pity in his eyes, no hint of compassion. But there was something else, a deep satisfaction in knowing that she had finally realized the gravity of the situation. Victor was a man who commanded power, and for the first time, Sienna understood that she was nothing more than a pawn in his game. "Tell me where Mitch is. Now. And I'll consider your plea," Victor said coldly, his voice a dark promise. Sienna nodded, her throat dry. "He's hiding out at the old warehouse on the outskirts of town. But I don't know if he'll come, Victor. He's careful. He's always been careful." Victor's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed. He was already calculating his next move, already one step ahead. "If he's smart, he won't show his face. But if you've led me to a dead end, you'll pay the price for that, Sienna." As Victor turned on his heel, ready to leave, Holden felt the weight of his own guilt pressing in. He had been silent throughout the entire exchange, watching as Sienna, the woman he had once trusted, crumbled before Victor. But Holden knew that his silence would cost him. He had to act, and he had to do it fast. Holden moved toward Sienna, his voice barely a whisper. "We can't do this. We can't let Victor have Mitch. If he finds Mitch, there's no telling what he'll do. We need to stop this now, before it's too late." Sienna's eyes flashed with fear, but she knew the truth in Holden's words. There was no way they could let Victor catch Mitch. The consequences would be catastrophic. But the question remained, could they really defy Victor and survive? Could they betray the man who controlled so much of their world and still find a way out of this alive? Meanwhile, outside the walls of Victor's empire, Nick and Sharon were blissfully unaware of the danger that was closing in on their family. For them, the priority was simple: protect Noah. It didn't matter who was responsible for the chaos that was unfolding around them, as long as Noah was safe, nothing else mattered. But little did they know that the very danger they were trying to avoid was rapidly approaching, and it would take them all by surprise. Victor had become a master of manipulation, and he had a way of using people to further his own agenda. Nick and Sharon's good intentions would soon be tested, and the stakes were higher than they ever imagined. Holden and Sienna, now aware that they were playing a game far too dangerous to win, faced an impossible choice. If they told Victor the truth, they would be forced to live with the consequences of their betrayal. If they lied, they risked angering the one man in Genoa City who could destroy them with a single command. Would they risk everything to try and escape Victor's grasp? Or would they sell Mitch out to save themselves from his wrath? As Victor moved swiftly toward his goal, Holden and Sienna found themselves at a crossroads. The lies that had been their armor for so long were no longer enough to protect them. Would they give Victor what he wanted, knowing the cost would be high? Or would they defy him, gambling everything they had in a desperate attempt to break free from his control? In the cold, calculating world of Victor Newman, there was no room for weakness, no room for mercy. Every decision mattered, and one wrong move could send them spiraling into a fate worse than death. Sienna, Holden, and Mitch were all trapped in Victor's web, and only time would tell how much they would have to sacrifice to escape it. This narrative provides a compelling, immersive, and dramatic expansion of the plot you've provided. Let me know if you would like further adjustments or additions.